In the 20th century, the United States built more than 90,000 dams. They lit up cities, irrigated farmlands, and powered an entire economy. But something was lost in return: salmon. On the Elwha River, which once welcomed more than 400,000 salmon each year, 2 dams blocked the flow, turning the entire river into a dead ecosystem. In a nation willing to spend billions on conservation, the Elwha was long considered a lost cause, until the United States made a rare decision to completely dismantle what it had built and return the river to its natural flow. Just a few years later, something remarkable happened. Salmon began to reappear in stretches of the river where they had been absent for generations. What really happened to the Elwha River, and how were salmon able to rediscover paths their ancestors had long forgotten? All of this will be revealed by Terran Works in this video. Before human intervention, the Elwha River was one of the most robust salmon ecosystems on the entire U.S. West Coast. Each year, more than 400,000 Pacific salmon, including Chinook, coho, sockeye, pink, and chum, migrated upstream from the ocean to spawn. Some Elwha Chinook were so large that they weighed over 45 kilograms, ranking among the largest salmon ever recorded. For the lower Elwha Klamath people, the river was not merely a source of food, but the living axis of an entire culture, where salmon nourished people, forests, and wildlife for thousands of years. At that time, the Elwha stretched more than 70 miles upstream, winding through the old-growth forests of Olympic National Park in northwestern Washington state. Its channel was filled with large woody debris, gravel, and complex side channels, ideal habitat for juvenile salmon to shelter and grow. Each spawning season, the carcasses of salmon that died after laying eggs carried nitrogen and phosphorus from the ocean back into the river and surrounding forests. Later studies showed that in rivers like the Elwha, as much as 20 to 25% of the nitrogen found in riparian vegetation originated from salmon. The turning point came in the early 20th century, when 2 hydroelectric dams were successively built on the Elwha River. The first dam, Elwha Dam, was completed in 1913 near the river's mouth, only a few kilometers from the ocean. The second, Glines Canyon Dam, was constructed deep within an upstream canyon and completed in 1927. Both were designed to supply electricity to paper mills, sawmills, and the rapidly growing town of Port Angeles, a typical choice across the United States during the era of industrialization. Notably, however, neither dam included a fish passage. At the time, ecological science was still in its infancy, and salmon were not yet considered a priority in infrastructure design. Moreover, the location of Glines Canyon Dam, set within a narrow, steep canyon with sheer rock walls, made the construction of fish passage facilities nearly impossible with early 20th century technology. Even when Washington state later passed laws requiring fish ladders, the 2 Elwha dams remained in place and were granted exemptions. Within just a few years of the dams becoming operational, more than 70 miles of upstream habitat, where most natural spawning grounds were located, were completely cut off from the salmon life cycle. Runs that had once returned in the hundreds of thousands each year could no longer reach their spawning areas. Salmon numbers plummeted dramatically, from hundreds of thousands to only a few thousand fish per year by the late 20th century. As salmon declined, a cascade of ecological effects spread throughout the system. Marine-derived nutrients were no longer carried back into the riparian forests. The river channel gradually became simpler, lacking large woody debris and the natural disturbance of sediments. Insects declined, birds and mammalian predators became scarcer, and the system that had once functioned in harmony with the rhythm of salmon began to drift away from its natural balance. For nearly 100 years, the Elwha River continued to flow, but the life cycle that had once defined its vitality was no longer whole. By the end of the 20th century, as the benefits provided by the 2 dams grew increasingly small compared to what they had taken away, a fundamental question emerged. Should these structures on the Elwha River be removed or preserved? The dams were aging, their power generation efficiency was low, and maintenance costs were steadily rising. More importantly, both lay entirely within the boundaries of Olympic National Park, a federally protected area where ecosystem conservation had gradually come to outweigh industrial interests. After decades of debate among government agencies, scientists, local communities, and the lower Elwha Klamath tribe, the U.S. government made a rare decision to completely remove both dams rather than retrofit them or construct fish passages. In 1992, Congress passed the Elwha River Ecosystem and Fisheries Restoration Act, setting a goal not merely to restore salmon populations, but to recover the entire Elwha River ecosystem to a condition as close to natural as possible. This decision carried significant risks. Nearly 20 million cubic meters of sediment had been trapped behind the dams for almost a century. Removing them could cloud the water, reshape the river mouth, and affect nearshore marine life. At the time, no one could be certain how quickly salmon would return, or whether they would return at all. Yet, despite the controversy and uncertainty, dismantling officially began in 2011. It became the largest dam removal project in U.S. history, not only in terms of engineering scale, but also in vision. For the first time, humans deliberately chose to dismantle their own infrastructure in order to give a river back to nature. When the final sections of the dams disappeared, the Elwha River was reconnected for the first time in nearly a century, from the Olympic Mountains all the way to the ocean. There was no ribbon-cutting ceremony, only water beginning to flow as it naturally should, and salmon responding almost immediately. Alongside the dam removal, management agencies released a limited number of juvenile and adult salmon into the upper watershed as an initial support measure. These releases were small in scale and intended as a jump start, not as a large-scale, hatchery-based restoration. Within just a few months, the first individuals were documented moving through river reaches that had long been blocked. By the following spawning seasons, salmon began to appear on gravel beds that had seen no spawning activity for generations. Surveys showed that multiple species reclaimed the upper river, including Chinook, coho, sockeye, and chum. Even more striking was the fact that some returning salmon did not originate from the river's historical local stocks, but from neighboring populations in the region. This suggested that salmon rely not only on natal homing, but also possess a flexible capacity to recolonize when natural conditions are restored. The return was quiet, but decisive. After nearly a century of separation, the salmon life cycle, the foundation of the entire Elwha ecosystem, had finally been reconnected. As salmon returned to the upper reaches, change unfolded not only beneath the water's surface. Each spawning season, salmon completed their life cycle and left behind something the Elwha River had lacked for nearly a century: marine-derived nutrients. Nitrogen, phosphorus, and carbon were carried upstream and absorbed into the water, soils, and riparian vegetation. Within just a few years, ecological studies documented a clear increase in aquatic insects, the foundation of the river's food web. Fish-eating birds and riparian bird species returned in growing numbers. Mammals such as river otters, black bears, and martens began appearing more frequently along the Elwha's banks, taking advantage of the seasonal food supply brought in by the salmon. The recovery extended beyond the river channel itself. Scientists detected salmon-derived nitrogen reappearing in riverside trees, a sign that the long-broken connection between river and forest was being restored. Vegetation became more diverse and stable, helping to anchor soils, reduce erosion, and improve overall water quality. However, the revival of the Elwha River did not unfold entirely smoothly. As salmon returned in large numbers, the ecosystem had to adjust to sharp increases in nutrients following each spawning season. In some river reaches, elevated nutrient levels stimulated strong growth of algae and microorganisms, seasonally reducing dissolved oxygen. At the same time, dam removal released vast amounts of long-trapped sediment, making the river more turbid during the early years and reshaping the river mouth. Alongside these natural processes came management concerns. Some fishers worried that salmon runs would become more dispersed, while managers had to weigh the balance between conserving wild salmon and the continued role of hatchery support programs. All of this underscored that restoration is not a destination, but a long and complex process. The Elwha did not instantly return to an idealized state. Rather, like any ecosystem freed after prolonged control, it requires time to readjust and find its own balance. The story of the Elwha is not unique. In the western United States, another river was also fragmented for decades and is now undergoing a similarly profound transformation, the Klamath River. The Klamath was once one of the most important salmon migration corridors in the region, sustaining indigenous communities and riparian ecosystems for thousands of years. But when hydroelectric dams were built in the 20th century, salmon were cut off from their upstream habitat. Fish populations declined sharply, water quality deteriorated, and conflicts intensified among hydropower interests, agriculture, conservation efforts, and indigenous rights. And as with the Elwha, the ultimate solution was not retrofitting dams or adding fish ladders, but removing the dams entirely to restore natural river flow. The difference lay in scale. The Klamath involved 4 large dams spanning 2 states, Oregon and California, and required coordination among dozens of local communities, management agencies, and multiple indigenous tribes, making it one of the most complex dam removal decisions ever undertaken in the United States. When the final dams were removed in the early 2020s, salmon began returning to river reaches that had been inaccessible for decades. If the Elwha demonstrated how a small river could rebound quickly, the Klamath showed that even large, heavily stressed river systems can recover, so long as their ecological corridors are reopened. Not every river has been set free like the Elwha and the Klamath. On the Snake River, salmon recovery is no longer a purely technical challenge. It has become a decades-long national controversy. The Snake is a critical migration corridor for Chinook salmon and steelhead, flowing through the arid interior of the U.S. Pacific Northwest before joining the Columbia River. In its lower reaches, 4 large dams stand in succession. They generate electricity, support inland navigation, provide irrigation for agriculture, and help stabilize livelihoods across a vast region. As a result, each dam on the Snake is not only an ecological barrier, but also an economic and political pillar. Over many years, a wide range of mitigation measures has been implemented. Fish ladders, barging fish around dams, and flow management designed to support migration. Yet despite these efforts, salmon populations have continued to decline. This has pushed the debate to its core question: should these dams be removed? On the Snake River, that question extends far beyond salmon alone. It touches on energy production, agriculture, jobs, and food security, making it one of the most complex and hotly debated issues in the United States' broader effort to restore rivers and ecosystems. The stories of the Elwha, the Klamath, and the Snake show that restoration is not a ready-made formula, but a series of difficult choices between human needs and the natural world. And they share one fundamental truth: restoration is not about turning back time, but about creating the conditions for nature to adapt in a world that has already changed. The Elwha is not a miracle, nor is it an ending. It is proof that when humans are willing to step back, rivers can find their own way forward. And the remaining question, not just for the Elwha, the Klamath, or the Snake, but for thousands of other rivers, is this: how much space are we willing to give back to nature so it can function on its own? What do you think about this issue? Leave a comment And don't forget to subscribe to continue exploring future journeys with Terran Works.